We are truly privileged to have the permission to come and to film in the Israel Museum. One of the most interesting wings of the Israel Museum is a model that shows how the city of Jerusalem looked in the time of our Lord Jesus 2,000 years ago in the 1st century AD. Or, like some of the scholars and the archaeologists, how did the city look like one night before it was destroyed by Titus in the year 70 AD? Behind me is a beautiful mosaic that shows the city of Jerusalem, or shows the model that we are going to explain about. If we want to start with the city started in the south. It is very close to a valley which is known as the Kidron Valley. And the reason that the city starts at the Kidron Valley, because of a spring known as the Gihon Spring. And what would you look for 3,000 years ago to build your city? You would look for a good source of water. And that's how the city started from there. But we know that the city, before it started or it was built, it was called Jebus, because of the Jebusites lived. King Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem. Later, King Hezekiah expanded the city towards the west, and that's a city that was destroyed by the Babylonians 586 BC by Nebuchadnezzar. After the destruction of the Babylonians, Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra came and built the temple, and Nehemiah continue and reconstruct the city of David, and more expansion to the city to the west took place. During the Hasmonean period, there was no more space at this section to build more of the city, and that's where the city expanded a bit more towards the north. And at this point, we can see that there's a wall and there's another second wall that's around the city. And that's the city in the time of our Lord Jesus. In the year 41 AD, Herod Agrippa built the third wall surrounding the city. And from the year 41 AD, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre came inside the city of Jerusalem until our present day. Where I'm standing on a mountain called Mount Scopus, and from here you can see the city is surrounded with three valleys. One valley is known as the Kidron Valley, another valley that crossed through this section called the Cheesemakers Valley or the Tyropean Valley, and another valley that comes from the area where the western hill is the Hinnom Valley. Here is the Kidron Valley that connects with the Hinnom Valley. And you can see part of the city of David where it was built by King David. Through those beautiful buildings and mansions, the second one, starting from the bottom, is a synagogue, the synagogue of Theodosius. It is inside this synagogue where St. Stephen was preaching, where he was pushed out into the Kidron Valley where he was stoned to death. Here's the Hinnom Valley, the Valley of Hell. And that's the valley that connects with the Kidron Valley, and they continue as one valley towards the Dead Sea, towards the south, as the Kidron Valley. But in this valley here, very close to the city, there's a pool known as the Pool of Siloam. It is in this pool, the man who was blind since birth and he was healed by our Lord Jesus, Jesus sent him towards the pool to wash. And the pool is called the Pool of the Sent, Shiloah or Shiloah, the Pool of Siloam. During the time of King Solomon and Ezra and Nehemiah, the temple was only the structure that you see in the middle. In the 21st BC, Herod decided to enlarge the temple, and his expansion is what we see between the royal Stoa and the Antonia fortress. The royal Stoa where the priest's offices stood, as well as the market to include the money changers. However, the courts of the Gentiles and within the Soreq divided wall the holy precinct. Beautiful gate lead into the holy precinct straight into the women court. Now 15 steps lead to Nicanor Gate, towards the inner area where the Israelites' court stood, used by men, then the altar before the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was divided into two parts: the first room where the menorah stood, showbread, and the incense altar, where Zacharias, John the Baptist's father, had the vision while burning the incense. Then stood the veil that separates the dwelling place of God from the outer sanctuary. Only the high priest could enter within the curtain once a year on the Day of Atonement or Yom Kippur. Where we are standing, we're standing east, and there's a gate called the Eastern Gate. But if we continue walking through the Kidron Valley, we're heading towards south, sandwiched between the eastern pinnacle and the western pinnacle. There are gates facing south, which we call them the Southern Gate, or also known as the Hulda Gate. And those steps that you see them are the entrances through the south, and very much likely when they came with Jesus, Mary and Joseph to the temple, that's the gate that they probably used to enter into the temple. And here we're standing west. At the western section, there were more gates, such as a gate called Robinson Gate, Barclays Gate, and Wilson's Gate, that you see them here on this section, which is part of the western wall. And what we're looking at right now is part of the western wall of the temple. If you go to the Antonia fortress on the wall, you will see a gate, this gate called the Sheep's Gate. But outside the city, during that time, through that gate, there were pools. And one of them we can see is a pool very close to the wall, which is called the Pools of Israel, and another important two pools called the Pools of Bethesda. And those Pools of Bethesda have 5 porticos, you can see them. But also the Pools of Bethesda are mentioned in the Gospel of John chapter 5. That's the place where the Lord healed a man who was sick for 38 years. And with this, my friends, we conclude episode number 1. Episode number 2 will be walking through the city during the last week of the life of our Lord Jesus before his crucifixion, death, and resurrection into the city of Jerusalem.